Hi, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from today. Welcome to our session here with United We Dream. My name is Cynthia Garcia. My pronouns are she, hers, ella, and I have the privilege and honor to work here at United We Dream under our deportation defense and community protection work. I'm here today with Jasmine and Dulce, who are part of our team. And so we're going to get going on introducing ourselves and just talking to you for the next 30 minutes about how you can show up for immigrant communities and how we can continue to fight together to make sure that they're represented. So I'm going to pass it to you, Jasmine, and we'll get started in just a minute.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia, and hi, everyone. So happy to be able to join you virtually in this space. My name is Yasmine Martinez. I use she, her, hers, ella pronouns, and I'm joining you all this morning from California. I am currently the Central Valley organizer with United We Dream. My family actually immigrated from Mexico to California in the early 1970s, and we've been here ever since. For my family and myself, deportation has always been something that I had grown up with. The unease of the potential of our lives changing and being forced to leave from our homes was always in the back of my mind. Fortunately enough, my family is now protected, but there are so many others here, my family and my communities, that are not. So I'm here. I'm happy to join United We Dream to make sure that the agencies that continue to threaten our families and our communities and across the nation are dismantled. Passing it over to you, Dulce.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'm also glad to be here joining the space along both of you and everyone else who is watching from their homes. Good afternoon, good morning. So my name is Dulce Montoya. I use pronouns she, her, ella. I'm also one of the coordinators for United We Dream Migrant Watch Hotline. So the hotline is a tool where folks are able to report agency activity in their community, such as ICE, CBP, the police, racial profiling, and the detention of a loved one. I also migrated from Mexico at the age of 12, along with my family, to the state of Oklahoma, what we now call our home. My family is of mixed status. I have DACA. I'm not so young anymore. I'm also a mom of two beautiful children, but big part of my family still remains undocumented. So this has what has kept me going and motivates me to keep on moving towards dismantling agencies that targets families just like mine, and also keep on pushing for permanent protection for all. And I'll pass it to you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Dulce. And thank you, everyone who's joining us. Wherever you are, I would love to see if you can put on the comments where you're joining us from, what are your pronouns, what brings you to this space. I think what Dulce and Jasmine shared is real. And I also want to just kind of give us some grounding before we start our conversation. I want to make sure that you know how critical spaces like today here with the Frontline are for our people. We have just passed the 100 days mark with the current administration. And I know all of us here have fought with everything in us to remove Trump from office. And more than ever, I know that you know what's at stake. Our communities haven't been safe, regardless of who is in office, which is why we need to continue to do the work beyond Election Day. So this week, we witnessed a community in Glasgow, Scotland, stopping a deportation by taking direct action. Over 200 people locked arms, put their bodies on the line, and shared our struggle and stopped the deportation of a community member. That is to show that immigration enforcement is also global, and our shared struggle is tied to one another's, just like our liberation. And so I know Jasmine and Dulce, you both work in organizing with immigrant communities. We're immigrants ourselves, so this is true to our heart and to our own community. And so I wanted to kick it off with a small panel discussion and just share some of the questions that I want our audience today to know why we're doing this work. And also share with them next steps on how they can too continue to defend and protect immigrant communities. So I want to start with you, Yasmine, to share with us a little bit of how does the immigration enforcement feed into the larger prison industrial complex?
Okay, thank you, Cynthia, and thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it ties perfectly into this question. So, when we think of what the prison industrial complex is, we must acknowledge what it actually means. So, detaining and holding people against their will. The sole purpose of jailing people is to make profit off of them. The profits then fuel the system of policing, and the cycle continues. We see it clearly in the impact it has in our communities. The data shows that people of color are criminalized and incarcerated by the millions, while billions of dollars are spent on a system that has only harmed our people instead of investing in life-affirming resources to promote health and mental wellness. We know it's pregnant systems that are choice, and we must move away from them and create community-based responses for accountability and transformation. Keeping these systems of oppression in place just for profit leads to the expansion of the system, creating a dependency on the carceral system for jobs and economic gains, which are other issues that are not a concern of for these detention centers. But behind these institutions, there are real people like Angel Santos. He was a DACA recipient that was detained in a for-profit detention center from November 2017 to March 2021. While in this detention center, he was exposed to COVID-19 due to the cruelty treatment and keeping him away from his family and community. He was deported of March of this year under the new administration. He was robbed from his freedom after all the abuses and harm from agencies like ICE. The harm that started at his local police department. Angels deserves an opportunity to be home, and we must fight to bring him back home.
Mm-hmm. That's right, Jasmine. And yes, like you mentioned, we need to continue to expose ICE, CBP, and the police, right? Because we know that they continue to target and racial profile our immigrant community, especially Black immigrants and people of color. Throughout the years, we have seen a carceral system that keeps evolving. It's the same, but it keeps evolving, right? So how are we seeing incarceration now? Well, we know that ICE and CBP continue to collaborate with racist local agencies like the police to funnel large amount of people into the deportation pipeline. And if you're asking yourself, how are they doing this? They rely on programs like 287G agreements. These are contracts that allow state and local police to act as federal immigrant agents. These are voluntary contracts and agreements, and these and the collaboration between them help fuel the larger immigration detention system and the carceral system. They do it by removing people from their families, from school, work, and then placing them into prisons, jails, and detention centers. They're profiting from the suffering of our community members who have endured the abuse of and negligence right inside of these jails and detention facilities. These agencies continue to operate without accountability of the violence, sexual abuse, the medical neglect, and even death that they have caused inside of these detention centers.
Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Dulce. I think it's critical in this moment that we also acknowledge that COVID-19 has been weaponized in the immigration enforcement, right? We saw the closure of the border under a statement of keeping the country safe. But in the meantime, detention centers, jails, and prisons have the highest numbers of our communities impacted by COVID-19. So much so that there are data to prove that actually ICE has intentionally threatened immigrants with deportation if they speak out against what's happening in regards to COVID-19. So it's critical that we continue to expose the agencies that you both share, that we continue to acknowledge that deportations like Angel is still happening, even though Trump is no longer in office. And that Biden, under the Obama administration, was an accomplice to millions of deportations of our community in the years they were in office. And so, with that, I want to ground us to ask you the question: what have we learned from the last 4 years during the Trump administration? And how can it ground us for the fight ahead?
And I can take lead on that. That's a great question. So during the 4 years that Trump was in office, I mean, we saw his cruel racist agenda since the beginning, right? His administration focused on increasing budgets to punitive agencies like ICE and CBP, and also the militarization of the southern border. The Trump administration exploded policies like Title 42. And if you don't know what Title 42, this is a policy that, a program that expulses and deports people with the excuse of COVID-19 as a health crisis. And this allows for people to be immediately deported. This is an actual policy that the Biden administration has retained, and they must rescind immediately. This program targets asylum seekers, in the vast majority being Black immigrants and immigrants of color. So we also saw the separation of children from their families, and we continue to see the increased influx of facilities to hold migrant children. These facilities are not better just because we have a new administration. We must end our response of jailing immigrants and their families, and truly start building a system that welcomes people and sees their full humanity. They need to end programs like 287G agreements and intergovernmental agreements, and also end policies like Title 42, which we know they have the power to do so. So we need to continue pushing to defund ICE and CBP and the police. These agencies were founded in racism, xenophobia, and the criminalization of people of color. So it's time that we move into a humane immigration system that welcomes and respects and honors the human rights and the dignity of all people.
Yes, thank you, Dulce, for bringing that critical information to us. I think something that we've also been able to see in the last 4 years, as you mentioned, is the criminalizing narrative that have been used. Those narratives thus increase the prison populations. Our communities live in constant fear of mass raids, not knowing whether or not they were going to return back to their families and their children. This was seen nationwide, to the point where it became a norm to see mass detentions, deportation, and larger access by ICE. In my home state of California, we have led much of the immigration policies. We have been able to provide needed COVID relief to those who were excluded from the federal relief and limited access to ICE. However, what happened was that the Trump administration was going head-on against California. The Trump administration threatened to withhold funding from the state and other necessary departments. No administration should withhold relief, especially when thousands of people are at risk of a deadly disease. We should not stay complacent and demand firm leadership from the new Biden administration to put an end to the Trump-era immigration policies, creating long-lasting policies that will protect our communities.
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, Dulce, for sharing that. I think that the piece I want to share before we move into more actionable steps is that we are going to continue to hear the statement of going back to normal. We want to go back to things before Trump. We want to go back to this sense of safety, right? And I think it's critical that we acknowledge that after Trump, after what we have lived over the last 4 years, we can't go back. We can't settle for seeing thousands of people continue to be detained for profit. We can't settle for billions of dollars spent in more systems of policing and yet be bankrupt when it comes to actually funding life affirming systems. What we're seeing is that in 2020, so many of our communities, regardless of immigration status, were labeled essential. And this year again, we are challenging if they deserve a pay that allows them to live, to take care of their families. And I think it's critical that we acknowledge that that has happened way before Trump came into office. And I think it's critical that while we have exposed a lot of what happened during the Trump era, it will continue to happen if we don't hold those elected officials accountable. The new administration has the power to do that. It has the power to say, we can and must change the way that we see migration. Immigrants in this nation are essential, and they are part of a broader community that has always been impacted by racial profiling, by lack of access to healthcare, like we're seeing in the vaccine. And they have always struggled with employment, with abuses of cheap labor, and even not getting paid, right? And so I think it's critical that we have a lot more things in common when we're fighting for fair and equitable wages, when we're fighting for healthcare. Because our shared fight is not just about citizenship. Because we know that citizenship is not keeping our Black brothers and sisters safe. And we know that citizenship is not keeping our Asian Americans safe. Communities of color have been targeted since the inception of this country, since the very genocide that allowed the US to exist. And so I want to really extend this as an invitation for us to continue to grow this movement together. Because we're fighting hundreds and hundreds of years of systemic violence and racism. And it is critical that we acknowledge that we're doing all of the small steps, one behind the other, to build the power that is going to get us to the finish line, where our people are truly free, where we're funding things that our people need, like that healthcare, like mental health, like education that doesn't leave us in debt, while agencies like ICE and CBP have billions of dollars and a slush fund that they can use and access at any time. And it's really easy right now to see this administration back off and say what's happening at the border requires more funding. But that is simply not true. Agencies like ICE and CBP will continue to hurt our people unless we stop the power and defund them fully. And even if ICE and CBP are gone, we know the police is literally killing our people. And so we shout from the rooftops that we must stand in solidarity, and we must also call for the defunding of the police. Because as Dulce shared, they are the Polimigra as we know it as community, which is literally ICE and police are the same ish twice. And so it's critical that we continue this fight together. And so I want to invite you to share with us what are some of the steps that we can take to make sure that we defend and fight for our collective liberation and protect immigrants and people of color today. And Jasmine, you can kick us off.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, so what I can connect it to, and some of the work that we're doing, being part of on the ground kind of person with United We Dream, we wanted to go ahead and inform our folks about the Undeniable campaign that we launched this year. So our demands are very clear. Like there's no confusion of what we are demanding from this administration. Number one is to pass permanent protection, a legislative solution that includes citizenship for all 11 million undocumented people living here in the U.S. Number two, defunding ICE, CBP, and the police, holding these agencies accountable for the pain and deaths of immigrants that they have caused. Third is immediate protections by reinstating and expanding DACA and TPS. We know that these are programs that were limited during the Trump administration, and now we see it with our own campaigns to help first-time applicants get these protections. Those are the three main demands that we are listing. And through our Undeniable campaign, we want to make sure that we are reaffirming our collective power when we help deliver Biden's victory and Democratic control of the Senate. We delivered for them, and now they must deliver for us. And you can take action by signing the petition that we'll be dropping in the chat.
Thank you,
Yes, and
Jasmine.
I can follow. Oh, sorry, Cynthia.
Go ahead.
I can follow up with Jasmine said. And also, this is more like we talked about it, right? We continue to see arrests during the new administration. Not like things continue to move in that direction. So it's always really important to be prepared, and as a community to be prepared in case we were to encounter these agencies and how to hold our power, right? Because we hold the power. So these are the things that you need to know. So you're also able to be part of this movement, and this is what you need to do next. Join us on our next event for deportation defense trainings by texting the word "Know Your Power" to 877. I'm going to repeat it again. Know Your Power to 877, o en español, Conoce tu Poder al 877, and receive like notifications of what our next trainings. You're also going to be seeing a link dropped in the chat about Know Your Power, and there you can also find like really valuable information about know your rights and know your power. Also, we need to continue to hold the current administration accountable, right? As I mentioned, we continue to see arrests. We continue to see increasement on detentions. So we need to continue to record and report agency activity in our community. Is it like the police, ICE, CBP? It's really important that we know who is detaining, arresting, and jailing our community. So continue to report this to our Migrant Watch hotline. And if you're asking yourself, how can allies support? Well, simple. Jasmine talked about Undeniable campaign. How can you join? You can join our Undeniable campaign by also texting the word Undeniable to 877-877. And I'm going to repeat it once again. Undeniable to 877-877. So go ahead and do that. Get your phones out. Text those two words. Also, click on those links that were dropped in the chat because they do hold a lot of valuable information.
Thank you. Thank you both. And, Dulce, you talked about know your power. What do we mean? We know we got us. And it is important and critical that as we saw this week in Scotland, community literally taking direct action and saying no more deportations, that's what we mean reclaiming our power. Making sure that you have those resources so that you're able to share with immigrant communities, so that you're able to also know what are some actionable steps. On that Know Your Power page at the unitedwithdream.org page, you're going to find out what can allies do to support. And it can be something simple as actually having that link available and share it with friends and with community members. We also, as Dulce shared, we have trainings about how to record immigration enforcement so that you're able to actually identify any trends that are happening in your locality. For a very long time, ICE and CBP roamed our streets without any hesitation of bursting through doors, of carrying out immigration enforcement without somebody holding them accountable, right? And so it is critical that we continue to record all forms of policing, and that we also honor and respect that the people who often they are detaining, or the people who may be at the other side where the arrest is happening, we don't want to focus on them. We want to focus on the agencies. We want to focus on how they're carrying out their operations, because that is also how we strategize on how we get our people released, on how we cut off that power, on how we end 287G agreements, on how we stop law enforcement collaboration with ICE and CBP. And before I ask our final question for Dulce and Yasmine, who have shared so much with us about their work, I want to also remind us that there are millions of people, as Dulce shared and as Yasmine shared, there's 11 million people who need a pathway to citizenship today. But there are still millions that are being displaced all around the world because of climate change, because of systemic violence, because of religion, because of identity. And so immigration shouldn't be something that we stop. It should be something that we continue to work together to welcome people, to see their full humanity, to ground us in our shared values, to ground us in what actually keep us well and connected. If COVID-19 taught us anything, is that something happening all across the globe will impact every single person. And so I want to reiterate that, because often we don't realize, right, that the model that the United States carries out by militarizing the southern border, by creating more barriers for people to freely move and migrate, there is an impact of people's lives, because people are being displaced, because people should have the freedom to seek better opportunities, to travel, right, to see the world. And while we may not have that access right now because of COVID-19, our communities have known for decades what it means to not have that access. And so it is critical more than ever that we continue to push together, that we demand the pathway to citizenship, that we demand the defunding of the agencies that are harming our people, and that we demand immediate action. As I shared, it's been over 100 days. And for many people, that's not enough time. But for communities of color all across the country, we can't wait anymore. Every day that passes, there are people who end up in detention facilities, who end up brutalized because of these agencies. And we demand more than just promises. We demand action. And so if you haven't heard more about our work, I invite you to look at the links that Dulce and Yasmine shared and that are in the chat. I welcome you to text the 877 number and join our Undeniable campaign. I invite you to come to one of our trainings on how to take direct action so that you can too replicate in many ways what we saw in the news, right? An act of community care, an act of we keep us safe, an act of no more deportations. Doesn't matter if it's across the globe or it's here in our communities, here in our backyards. So before we close off, I want to ask just Dulce and Yasmine, what keeps them grounded in this work? Because one thing that I think we all need is also joy and love, and be grounded in the love of our people. And so I can start with you, Dulce, and then go to Yasmine, and then we'll close this off.
Thank you, Cynthia. Always with the unexpected questions. But what keeps me grounded? I think my family and hope also. I feel like I still have the hope that my parents one day will have the chance to go back to what they call home and reunite with their family. And I get emotional. And also, I have hope that my kids get to see a better world, a world that includes people and where they don't see so much suffering. And that's what keeps me grounded and keeps me going every day. And I'll pass it to you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Dulce. Thank you, Cynthia, for the question. I will have to agree with Dulce. My family is one of the biggest reasons that I feel grounded. They support me in all the work that we do, and I feel like I have such a great sense of family within our community that keeps me moving and doing this type of work. Um, but another way I stay grounded, you all both know this, I have so many plants. So that's like kind of like a release. You know what they said, take care of yourself so you can take care of others. That is one way that I feel, I can ground myself where there's so much work to do. A small sense of, relief definitely keeps me going in this work. So those are the two things that keep me grounded.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone in the audience that joined us today. Please share the video. Please stay tuned. We have more sessions that we're going to be joining together. And I know we gave you a lot of information. So I hope that we see you again. And I know that we'll see you at the front lines. Thank you.
Um, Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I heard there's been so many amazing tracks and sessions, and so I'm so thankful that you decided to join us today. My name is Tamara Brummer, and I'm with Demand Justice, and we're going to present a presentation called Democracy on Fire. And I'm really thankful and glad to be joined by my colleague, Lenita King, who is leading some amazing work at Demand Justice as well. So we'll just jump right on in. So I'm Tamara Brummer. I am our senior advisor at Demand Justice. I've been at Demand Justice since June of 2020, but in the pandemic, what's that mean? But before that, I was a union organizer, and I worked almost exclusively in the labor movement, and really starting to understand more and more that the organizing that we do on the ground is impacted by so many forces, including our federal judiciary. And so that's why I'm really excited that we're able to join you all today to talk about, the things that we have at stake and all the great organizing that we're doing. But if we do not protect and defend our federal courts, it can often feel like it's an odds. So I'm going to turn it over to Lenita, and she'll take it from here.
Thank you, Tamara. Hi, everybody. I'm Lenita King. As Tamara mentioned, I'm the State Engagement Director here at Demand Justice. Some of you may have seen or heard a version of this before. Our messaging has pretty much been the same and stronger as we've lived through the last presidential administration. But I just want to kind of jump in from the start, give everybody a little bit of context of how we got here, and then we'll turn it back over to Tamara towards the end to tell us what we can do to protect our democracy and our values. So with that, we can go ahead and pull up the presentation. Great. So there's so much going on. There's so many headlines and stories, and literally all the things are on fire. Democracy is on fire. Sometimes it's hard to focus on that, and we lose the forest and all of the trees. So no matter if it's the fight for healthcare, like Tamara mentioned, the right to protect an environment, reuniting families, ensuring the right to vote, the courts, both state and federal, ultimately decide what can be done and what is legal and allowable. So it all comes down to the courts, which is why we're here today. Next slide. You can go ahead. One more, Chris. Thanks. So we're going to go ahead and start with the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court of the United States. So what's going on at the court? Sometimes in history, the Supreme Court has been an important force for good in decisions like Roe v. Wade and Brown versus Board of Education. Next slide. But right now, we can see that the court is dominated by a right-wing and partisan majority, which brings us to the point that our rights and our democracy are at risk every single day. Next slide. So we have 9 justices on the court. There's nothing special about that number. In fact, it's been changed a few times over the years. These justices are nominated by the president, and they're approved by the Senate for lifetime appointments. There are 3 judges considered to be the liberal wing of the court. Justice Sotomayor, the first Latina on the court, one, if not the most progressive voice on the court. We also have Justice Breyer, who is a little bit more moderate, and Justice Elena Kagan, who is also pretty moderate. So the rest of the partisan majority consists of Clarence Thomas, who is accused of sexual assault at his confirmation hearing and whose wife had very close ties in the Trump administration. There's Samuel Alito, who is a strong clinical conservative. Neil Gorsuch, who, fun fact, sits in Merrick Garland's stolen seat. Brett Kavanaugh, the awful man who has 83 ethics complaints against him at the time of his confirmation. And then Amy Coney Barrett, who was pushed through to replace RBG right before the election last year, thus stealing another seat from the people, which I am personally still bitter about. Next slide. So I want to take a step back and talk just a little bit more about Chief Justice John Roberts. He is a conservative who was appointed by George W. Bush. He oversaw the Trump impeachment trial, I guess we should say, which was notable due to its lack of witness testimony. In the wild world that we live in today, he is considered to be the swing vote on the Republican-dominated bench, even though he's the one who's overseen some of the most awful and partisan decisions, particularly around voting rights. And if you take a look at his record, he has a lot of breadcrumbs in his past that we can see where he has been attacking voting rights ever since he started with his law degree. So now I want to take a second to talk about the 3 Trump justices who are a direct threat to our democracy. Next slide. Oh, no, you're right. So the first is Amy Coney Barrett, who is, as I mentioned, she was the one who was pushed through last year after Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. She is one of the 3 appointed Supreme Court justices that Trump appointed during his tenure as president. He has appointed the most Supreme Court justices than any other president. The other one is Neil Gorsuch, who also sits in a stolen seat, stolen by Trump. He sits in Merrick Garland's stolen seat to the maneuvering by Mitch McConnell, who effectively changed the size of the court by leaving that seat open for over a year. And then there's Brett Kavanaugh, who I mentioned before, who has had a slew of credible sexual assault allegations against him, as well as some very suspicious financial circumstances. We should mention that, taking a step back, that Amy Coney Barrett was actually a protege of Antonin Scalia. She was very outspoken on her beliefs that the ACA and Roe v. Wade were decided wrongly, and she's almost guaranteed to vote to overturn both of them. So that's just a very clear example of how this group of people are clear threats to our democracy. So them getting here was as a result of a 30+ year plan to steal the courts. So next slide. And we're going to dive a little bit more into what that plan was. We ended up with this partisan majority due to the fact that Republicans were very strategic, and they enacted a long-term and intentional plan to take the courts. This is not by accident. They weren't lucky and happened upon a gold mine in the judiciary. They actively schemed, planned, and plotted for years to ensure that whatever they wanted for the rich and wealthy would be law. So this all started in the 70s and 80s with big business and corporate interests being greedy and wanting to write their own rules to rig the game. So in order to get away with it, they needed judges on their side. So they started spending some serious money to ensure that these referees or judges were in their pocket. And there's a ton of organizations that were created as vehicles for this specific line of work, but I want to talk about the big 3. The big 3 are the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank that, among other things, thinks that climate change is fake. There's the Judicial Crisis Network, which is a conservative group who pledged to spend $10 million to ensure Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. And there's the Federalist Society, who was once thought to have fringe ideas, but since then they have become very, very powerful and a staple in this arrangement of people. As we think about and conceptualize what these 3 groups of people are, the biggest element that's missing in most of their conversations is the voice of the American people. There's the lack of consideration. We get no say in it. It's just a group of very wealthy people with a lot of money and resources to spend to make things only good for themselves and their other wealthy friends and family, the corporations, not the American people. So I do want to take a step back and talk a little bit more specifically about FedSoc. So you can go to the next slide, please. FedSoc calls themselves a debate club. They call themselves a group of people interested in the current state of the legal order. They say that their goals are like reordering the legal system and putting a premium on traditional values. In reality, they have strong ties to conservative dark money, and they use that money to normalize their crazy fringe ideas. And probably one of the most damning things about them is that they give input to every GOP president since Reagan on judges and have been given near total control under Trump. And just because he's gone from office doesn't mean that they still don't have that power. So the way that they maneuver is they start recruiting folks in law schools. They literally start grooming students for judgeships while they haven't even passed their bar. They haven't done it. They start them very, very early in the process. In fact, all 6 of the Republican judges currently on the Supreme Court have had ties to FedSoc from years and decades ago up until today. And just for the sake of wrapping a bow on how this type of dark money flows, some of the people funding FedSoc are the same people donating to Mitch McConnell. They're the same people donating to the Heritage Foundation and Judicial Crisis Network and dozens of other extremely right-wing groups and Republican elected officials. So next, we should talk a little bit more about how these people have used their power to start dismantling our democracy and what that actually means. We're just going to talk a little bit more about what they paid for. And there is actually a lot to cover, but we're just going to highlight some of the very clear trends that we've seen over the last 10 years, and more importantly, during Trump's last administration. So some of the key trends that we see 6 unelected justices serving lifetime appointments, voting together to limit the right freedoms of 100 million Americans. You can go to the next slide. So we saw this with cases involving gerrymandering, voter ID laws, purging voter rolls, and restricting early vote access. Pre-Amy Coney Barrett, the 5 men on the court were literally banding together to figure out how to make voting the most difficult and inaccessible for folks. And we saw it time after time, specifically in like Wisconsin and Florida. There are no shortage of examples of them actively attacking our democracy. Next slide. So still pre-Amy Coney Barrett, these 5 Republican men constantly delivered for Trump. So instead of doing their job and checking his abuse of powers, they made decisions and laid things out in a way to protect him and his agenda, be it the border wall or the ban on transgendered service members, the Muslim ban, his tax returns. These are all clear examples of them delivering and staying on his side. And if we had more time, we could talk about the firing of directors at independent and ignoring subpoenas from Congress. But the thing that's the most clear is that the Republican bloc are too far partisan and too far political. And they have only gained more power now that Amy Coney Barrett has been confirmed. So they've opened, right, next slide if you haven't already gone. They've opened the floodgates for billionaires and corporations to try to buy elections, even more so now than there were before. They overturned a key part of the Voting Rights Act, which was a passion project for John Roberts. Like I mentioned in the beginning, he has been working on restricting voting rights from his time in the Revolution. More recently, they forced people to choose between their right to vote and their safety in Wisconsin in the middle of the whole panoramic, and upheld a poll tax for returning citizens in Florida. So the next trend we're going to talk about is the corporate special interest piece, which is still especially important today, even under a Biden administration. The Republican appointed justices are tilting the law in favor of the rich and powerful and against everyone else, right? They're making it extremely hard for people in the public sector to work in a union, and there could be more to come. I worry that a lot of us were like, cool, we can get all the things we want to get done now, where progressives are in the majority, but the buck kind of stopped at the courts. And this is one clear way where, or a clear example of where everything that we've been working and fighting for is in grave danger. They've made it so much easier for companies to kick consumers out of court with forced arbitration. The court has sided with banks. They've changed the structure of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. All of the things that we have worked and fought for as protections for ourselves are being dismantled at the courts. And the people behind the courts are the people with corporate special interests. And that's how all these things kind of tie together. One key takeaway, we could go to the next slide, is that frustratingly enough, Supreme Court justices are exempt from a code of ethics. They're almost untouchable during their lifetime appointment. as a reminder, as I've been saying, these people aren't chosen by American people. They aren't elected. They have next to no accountability. And that's one of the cornerstones of why our democracy is, in fact, on fire. And this court is a political threat to everything that we've been working for. So I'm going to turn it over to Terma to give us some insight as to what's really at stake. And then more importantly, what could we possibly do to protect ourselves and our democracy.
Thank you so much, Lanita, for laying that out for us. I just want to really nail home. There's a few things. First off, it's not a coincidence that our courts are under attack and that they're not the most democratic body. It's not a coincidence that the Republicans have been able to legislate through the federal judiciary and not through the houses of Congress and the Senate, the people's elected bodies, to make decisions for our greater good. But Republicans have used one of the most least democratic branches of the federal government to legislate their desires and their whims. So what's at stake with a partisan court? So the next slide, please. One more. Are y'all having fun in digital world? I wish I could see you all. One more slide, please. We got a lot of slides. Thank you. So, as Lanita has laid out, it all comes down to the courts. Everything that we are fighting for and advocating for with Congress and President Biden has the possibility of being undone by the state level and ultimately at the federal level in the Supreme Court of the United States. That includes voting rights, where Lanita has laid out so clearly, the Roberts Courts has already gutted the Voting Rights Act and could do the same with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act in H.R. 1. That means that Roe v. Wade is in even more danger. We have a significantly lower chance of enacting responsible gun control, the Green New Deal, Medicare for all. Everything is in danger of being dismantled or thrown out. And right now, we need to do everything in our power to protect our democracy. We should also mention that in order to achieve any of these goals, we need to get rid of the filibuster, full stop. It's racist, dated, and Republicans are using it to prevent progressive policies from getting passed. We can only expand the court if we get rid of the racist filibuster. Next slide, please. So in our theory of change, there's many things that we need to do. Lanita mentioned we need to have a code of conduct for our judicial candidates, our judges on the federal bench. But the most immediate thing that we can do right now to bring back the balance to our federal judiciary, to pave the way for all the things that we're fighting to protect and defend our democracy, is that we need to add 4 seats to the Supreme Court. That's the only way to restore balance immediately. Not yesterday, not 20 years from now, but today. We need to add 4 seats. Expansion is not the only reform our courts need, but that includes term limits and code of ethics, but it's the most immediate thing that we can do. And if you're an organizer, you understand that we have to take the first steps to build towards something better. And the first steps for us in protecting and defending our democracy through our federal courts is to expand the court. Next slide, please. So what does it mean to expand the court? That means we need a court that better reflects the whole country, not just special interests and the Republican Party. I don't know if you know this, but in the whole history of the Supreme Court, there's never been a Black woman even nominated to the court, let alone confirmed. What's that mean for Black women who have been building and protecting our democracy? We saw the work that Black women have been doing the past 5 years to protect and defend our democracy, but we don't have representation at the highest court in the land. So one of the first steps in adding seats to the court is straightforward, it's constitutional, and grounded in history. The size of the court has changed several times already. If you remember, when the news broke that Justice Scalia had died and his seat would be open, Mitch McConnell immediately stated he wouldn't allow the Senate to consider any nominations by President Obama, because there's no constitutional rules around those things, so he can do whatever he wants. That theft left a 422-day vacancy, the longest since 1869. McConnell essentially changed the size of the court for 1 year. And in another example, the last time that we officially changed the size of the court was during the Civil War. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to prevent white supremacists from trying to shape and dictate what the nation needed to do in that crisis. I don't think that things are not that much different now, that we are still fighting against white supremacy and racist policies, and that by changing our courts and expanding our courts, we have a better chance of defending and protecting our democracy. The next slide, please. So what does this mean? We're talking about it, and it can often feel that the courts are a very theoretical thing. To Lanita's point, we don't get to vote per se on our Supreme Court justices or our lower court justices, but we can demand that changes be made and that the will of the people will prevail. So last month, President Biden announced a court reform commission to study reform to the Supreme Court. Although that's a novel idea, the reality is that we can't wait for a commission of academics to tell us what we need to make our diversity more robust, to protect our wins, and to protect our future. We need action now. So Representatives Hank Johnson, Jerry Nadler, Mondaire Jones, and Senator Ed Markey have introduced the Judiciary Act of 2021, which is a bill to simply add 4 seats to the Supreme Court. Our task now is to build a grassroots movement that puts pressure on every single Democrat in Congress to support this legislation, because it's the only way we can restore the balance to our courts and to protect our democracy. And thankfully, I will say, I'm glad to be working at an organization that's leading the charge to organize support for this bill. Next slide, please. So none of this happens because we just sit around and we talk to each other. It happens because we organize, right? So the support for adding seats to the court has never been higher. Polling has shown us that American people, and a diverse swath of American people, want to see our courts expand because they understand what's happening. We need to convince some of our leadership, though. We need to convince Nancy Pelosi to bring the bill up for a vote on the floor, and Chuck Schumer to do the same in the Senate. The only way we can achieve this is by showing that expanding the court has the support of all Democrats. That's why the first step is pressuring our Democratic House members and senators to announce that they will co-sponsor the Judiciary Act. We've already gotten verbal support from some key players like AOC and Ilhan Omar, but what we need them to really do is just to go ahead and co-sponsor the actual legislation to expand the courts. So how do we do this? Next slide, please. Well, if they're in this session right now, they'll know that they need to take action. But in case that they're not, that they didn't join us today, there's a few things that we, the people, can do. And I really am calling on you to help us and to stand with us to make sure that we can protect and defend our democracy through our federal courts. So we're thinking about this and building a grassroots movement. So the first thing we need to do, we're asking folks to join a virtual meeting between volunteers and your member of Congress in office. It's so important for Congress people around the country to hear from their constituents about why this is so important to them and why they need to stand side by side and support the Judiciary Act of 2021. The second thing we're asking volunteers to do is to sign up to write letters to voters and campaign donors. The only way that we can build our movement is if we talk to people. And campaign donors are a really good way to engage an audience as well as push electeds to do the right thing. And then the last thing that we're asking folks to do is call your member of Congress. And we have a really cool patch through tool. And we have a team of organizers who are actually working right now patching through calls. It just takes 10 minutes right now to call your member of Congress and urge them to support the bill. Next slide, please. So I know that we're going to drop these links in the chat, so that people will have them and they'll be easy for you to copy and paste and take action immediately. But you can also visit demandjustice.com/court-reform to find more information. That's demandjustice.com/court-reform. I really want to make it clear that everything that we are fighting for is in danger of being dismantled if we continue to let the Roberts Court stand in our way. Just think about it. We passed comprehensive health care years ago, almost a decade ago. And what have Republicans decided to do? Instead of letting that be the law of the land, instead of listening to the people who have decided this, the American people, they've decided to legislate healthcare in our federal judiciary. And now we're even waiting to hear from this current Supreme Court session if we will be able to protect healthcare. And as Lanita lifted up already, we are constantly under attack around voting rights. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that in 2013, the John Roberts courts dismantled the most substantial parts of the Voting Rights Act, and now we're fighting to even give people water and food while they vote. So I really hope that you all will join us in this fight to protect and defend our democracy and to protect and defend our federal courts, and that is a place where we, the people, actually are seen and heard. So I don't know, I think we might have a chance for a couple of questions, but if not, thank you all so much for everything you all are doing and for joining us today.